All right, this is a lecture with a comma review at the beginning, then on comma splices, sentence fragments, and fuse sentences. Fuse sentences are also called run-on sentences, so those are the same thing. All right, I'm doing the comma review to see if maybe that won't help with some of the comma splices and the sentence fragments and run-on sentences. So, all right, what a useful thing a comma really is. It is important to making written English easy to read, and it has many roles. You may have learned that commas add breathing room to sentences so that your thoughts aren't all jumbled up. That makes it sound, however, as if you just throw a comma in whenever you've been going on too long, but that's not the case. There are general guidelines about using commas that are more about organizing the parts of our sentences than they are about forcing someone to pause while reading. All right, so we're going to start with commas and independent clauses. In general, commas separate independent clauses when they are connected by certain coordinating conjunctions. Some examples: we finished dinner in silence, comma, but I knew I would have to apologize. She wanted to help her dry garden, comma, so she invented her own rain dance. Now we know those are independent clauses because, like in the first example, we is your subject, finished is your verb, and in the second clause, I is your subject and knew is your verb. The second example, she is your subject and wanted is your verb. In the second half, she again is your subject, invented is your verb. So you have two independent clauses joined by two subordinating conjunctions. In the first one, it is but. The comma goes in front of your coordinating conjunction, not behind it. I'm still seeing people do that. It goes in front of your coordinating conjunction, okay, not behind it. Again, so is the coordinating conjunction in the second example. All right, so commas and introductory clauses. Scroll that up so it's a little more in the center there. Commas are also used after introductory clauses, such as in sentences where ideas are related but set off by great contrast, where they show cause and effect, where they indicate the order of events, or where an existing condition is introduced as the background to an event. Participle phrases in particular require a comma. If you take off your jacket, comma, you'll be much cooler. Being of sound mind and body, I leave all my worldly goods to my wife. Before you start building the furniture, you had better read the instructions. When you draft a string along the floor, the cats will always pounce on it. Sometimes commas are not used in sentences like this, but if you do decide not to use them in these circumstances, read the sentence aloud to yourself to make sure there's no room for confusion. All right, so commas and interjections. Many interjections are set off by commas. Similarly, commas are used in what they call tag questions, which are usually a confirming restatement of a sentence's overall idea. Some examples are, we're ready to go, aren't we? They'll never fit that couch up those stairs, will they? Those are tag questions. All right, so commas and vocative uses. We also use them in these vocative uses, which is when we call something by name or directly refer to them. Hey, Joe, what's happening? Listen, Lee, there's no telling what the market will do. You know, kid, you're a lot tougher than I was at your age. All right, so commas and non-essential ideas. We also use commas to insert non-essential ideas or facts into a sentence in the form of words, phrases, or clauses. Usually, these parenthetical insertions can be removed and leave the sentence grammatical. There's a place in Brooklyn just across the river where they serve the best pizza. I'm going to suggest, if that's okay, that you just let me help you. Okay, so if you take that non-essential stuff out, the sentence still makes sense. There's a place in Brooklyn where they serve the best pizza. I'm going to suggest that you let me help you. See, it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence, okay? That's why it's called non-essential. All right, and then there's commas and essential ideas. A common mistake is for writers to use commas to offset or enclose essential ideas, ones that you cannot remove without ruining the sentence. For instance, if you have a clause following a noun and beginning with that, then do not offset the that clause with commas. So it's wrong to say, I found a book, comma, that I wanted at the thrift store. That is a comma splice. It's correct to say, I found a book that I wanted at the thrift store without a comma. The same goes for expressions of emotions, feelings, and thoughts. It is wrong to put a comma here. You were wishing, comma, that you could see Istanbul. It is correct to leave that comma out. You were wishing that you could see Istanbul. I know you pause and you kind of take a breath, and you've kind of been taught maybe in some schools that you're supposed to put a comma there, but you do not actually put a comma there. That is a comma splice. Okay? All right, now we're going to talk about commas and series. Commas are used to set off multiple items in a series, including longer phrases or clauses. When one is used before a conjunction in a series, it is sometimes called an Oxford comma. I believe in the Oxford comma. Use it. There are apples, bananas, and oranges for sale. Our excited, wiggly, and very slippery puppy escaped from the bathtub. Representatives from Brazil, India, and China were present. Now that one in particular, if you don't have that comma there, what you're going to read is representatives from Brazil, India, and China were present. You've just joined India and China as one country, and you have India, China. Oxford comma belongs there. By the time the week was finished, the car was wrecked, our daughter had broken her leg, and I couldn't find my credit card. Now, those are put off by 3 different independent clauses. If you do not have the Oxford comma there, you've created a run-on sentence. Some style guides, most notably that of the Associated Press, recommend not using a comma before the final conjunction when listing nouns in a series, except in cases where it may resolve confusion, such as with a series of phrases that already include conjunctions. We drank wine, sang songs, and danced until dawn. I'm going to tell you now, I consider that wrong. Put your comma in there. I'm a firm believer in this Oxford comma, so that's why those commas are there. Funds were cut from the Parks and Recreation Department, the Public Safety and Security Bureau, and the Materials and Resources Division. If you don't have a comma between that bureau and the materials, that's going to be very confusing for your reader. Okay, they're going to think those two things are the same thing, and it just has a very long title. So use the Oxford comma. In my class anyway. You might run across an instructor who is not a believer in the Oxford comma, and they're going to say to leave that comma out, and you're going to go, yes ma'am or yes sir, and do what they tell you to do. Never argue with an instructor and what they prefer. That has just always been my best recommendation, but know that it is correct to put it there, okay, grammar-wise. But don't argue with them about it. It's just not worth your time or your effort. All right, commas and adjectives. Use commas to separate adjectives that describe the same noun with equal status and strength, which are known as coordinate adjectives. Do not use commas where the adjectives have different status or strength, which are called non-coordinate adjectives. You can also have a mix of coordinate and non-coordinate adjectives. So the first example, our landlord was a funny, generous man. You can insert and in between funny and generous and it still makes sense. And that helps. My son's beat up red bicycle was sold at our yard sale. Now, why doesn't one go there? Because it doesn't sound right if you say beat up and red bicycle, does it? Sounds awkward. A huge, tremendous seasonal riptide threatened the surfers. So you can put an and there. A huge and treacherous. Excuse me, treacherous. I said tremendous. All right, so you would use those there, okay? All right, commas and descriptions. Use commas to set off a descriptive clause or phrase that describes another part of the sentence. Hugging his blankie, the toddler fell asleep in the dog's bed. There she was, happy as a clam, telling the world about her new baby sister. Sitting on a pier with were our friends, fishing as if they hadn't a care in the world. All right, commas that set off names and dates. Seen a lot of people are having trouble with this particular one. Commas are used to set off place names and dates. A common mistake is to forget to include the second comma, which completes the offset. Jefferson City, Missouri is the state capital. Missouri is completely set off by commas, okay? Our service center is in Montreal, Canada, not far from the metro. You do the same thing with nations. However, if that place name is possessive, or if it becomes part of a compound, then there is no closing comma, such as in these two examples. Surfing thrives at San Diego, California's beaches. The Brooklyn, New York loving residents said they would never move. Oh, I didn't put that one on there. Well, that's an example anyway. All right, the next one is the 4th of July is my husband's favorite holiday. When the 4th of July is written in this particular manner, it's not offset by commas, okay? The research paper is due on Friday, comma, December the 15th, of course, comma, 2021, comma, by midnight. 2021, anytime you use a year, is offset by commas. All right, so is the complete date, that December 15th, 2021. All right, so you need to keep those things in mind when you're talking about dates in the future. All right. All right, comma and dialogue examples, or comma and dialogue. Commas are used in dialogue to separate what was said from the rest of the text, both for exact quotes and for paraphrasing. So the first one is a direct quote. I told him, comma, don't touch the stove. Now notice the placement of the comma. It is before the quotation marks. Notice the exclamation mark. It is inside of the quotes. Okay. The next example, when all is said and done, comma, quote, she said, comma, quote, we will have changed the world, period, quote. The period goes inside the quotes. The comma on one side is inside the quotes, but on the other side is it outside the quotes. You need to know where these placements are, okay? So I've seen some mistakes with this as well. Now the third is paraphrased, and there are no quotes in it. When they asked Sasha for money, comma, Jack reported, he said he was thinking it over. Okay? So that one doesn't have any quotes in it. All right, so commas should not separate two verbs or verb phrases in a compound predicate. When you do that, you create the dreaded comma splice. I sanded, comma, and painted the dresser. It's in between the two verbs. When you do that, that creates a comma splice. It's just I sanded and painted the dresser. All right, commas should not separate two nouns, noun phrases, or noun clauses in a compound subject or object. My graduate advisor, comma, and our department chair both sent letters. You're separating your two subjects, and so that creates a comma splice. My graduate advisor and our department chair both sent letters. So you don't need that comma there either. That also creates a comma splice. And I've seen this happen several times in this class. That's what you're doing. What I'm seeing more commonly than the other type of comma splice is this one. You're separating two verbs or you're separating two subjects. And so you need to watch for that, okay? All right, so we're going to go on to sentence fragments and run-ons. Basically, that's the two types of sentence problems. In general, fragments have too few words, while run-ons have too many. So sentence fragments, a sentence fragments is a piece of a sentence instead of the whole thing. The fragment can be a phrase or a dependent clause. Fragments can be a little mysterious because they're missing information. After the storm. Well, what happened after the storm? We don't know because this fragment is missing a verb. The tricky thing about fragments is that they are usually disguised as sentences. They can have all the dressings of a real sentence, like punctuation and capital letters. If I leave tonight, thinking about it, swimming in the lake. These fragments might look like sentences, but don't be fooled. They are incomplete. A good way to find sentence fragments is to read out loud. Sometimes it's easier to hear a bad sentence than to see it. Like thinking about it. A lot of people think of that implied you. Are you thinking about it? But the thing is it an implied you? Maybe maybe George is thinking about it. Maybe I am supposed to be thinking about it. Do you understand? So there's no subject there. You know, if I leave tonight, that's more like an introductory clause. If you leave tonight, what? What about it? Swimming in the lake. Okay. Who's swimming in the lake? Why are they swimming in the lake? What are the circumstances in which you came to be swimming in the lake? All right. So those are some things you need to think about. Those are the things that is hard for you to catch in your proofreading because you knew what you meant to say. That's why I suggest you read backwards because you'll catch them easier. All right, correcting sentence fragments. Weed fragments out of your writing by transforming them into complete sentences. One way you can correct a sentence fragment is by tacking it on to another sentence. You can tack it onto the front end of a sentence. After going to college for 4 years, I was ready to teach. And of course, the correction example is after going to college for 4 years, I was ready to teach. Those sentences say exactly the same thing to me. So I don't know what that is. I really don't. So we're going to just go on. You can also tack the fragment onto the back end of a sentence. Even though I awoke earlier than usual, period. I was late for work. So you can switch that up and put, I was late for work, comma, even though I awoke earlier than usual. Other times you can change the wording a little to make a fragment a complete sentence. The fragment. One of my friends who lost her ring in the swimming pool. Right now that doesn't make sense. Correction is one of my friends lost her ring in the swimming pool. Okay, you take who out, all right, and then the sentence makes sense. Some fragments will require additional information to correct. If I leave tonight, yeah, okay. If I leave tonight, I'll be in Baltimore by breakfast. Well, that makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? All right, so FYI, you want to remember a phrase as a group of related words that does not have a subject or a predicate. A dependent clause is a group of words that can't stand alone. All right, basically there's 3 ways to fix the sentence fragments. You tack it on to another sentence, you change the wording, or you add more information. Okay, run-on sentences. A sentence is supposed to be a unit of thought. A good sentence is a group of words that expresses an idea. A run-on sentence has too many ideas. It is overloaded with subjects and verbs. A run-on sentence occurs when two or more sentences are improperly joined into a single sentence, such as this one. Many grown-ups think that children watch too much television, and they think children do not read or exercise enough, and grown-ups worry about this. The tricky thing about run-on sentences is that you can't identify them by length. A long sentence can be grammatically correct, just as a run-on sentence can be short. She lives in Maine. He doesn't. That's a run-on sentence. All right, correcting run-on sentences. There are several ways to fix a run-on sentence. Often a sentence that is too long has to be separated into shorter sentences. So we're going to start with the run-on sentence. Melissa won first place, comma, her prize was $500. That comma is not sufficient to correct this sentence. So the first way to correct it is to simply put a period there. Melissa won first place, period. Her prize was $500. You can also fix a run-on sentence by adding a semicolon or a conjunction. So the first correction, you add the semicolon. The second correction, you add a conjunction and a comma. Melissa won first place, comma, and her prize was $500. So another option for repairing a run-on sentence is to make one of the independent clauses or a phrase or a dependent clause. So this is the run-on sentence. The board is scheduled to meet tomorrow. They have many matters to discuss. All in one breath there. So the correction, scheduled to meet tomorrow, comma, the board has many matters to discuss. You could have changed it into having many matters to discuss, comma, the board is scheduled to meet tomorrow. So you could have flip-flopped it just according to what you desire to give as the most important thing. Okay? All right, so you want to watch out. A comma alone cannot be used to link two independent clauses. If you do join two sentences with a comma alone, you have created the dreaded comma splice. So incorrect. Devin loves to play video games, comma, Taylor would rather go outside. That is a comma splice. But I wouldn't call it a comma splice. I would call that a run-on sentence because there's two independent clauses. So you can correct it with the comma and a conjunction. You can put a semicolon in there, or you can put a period in there. All right, which is what the three ways to fix a run-on sentence is. Separate into more than one sentence, use a semicolon or a conjunction, or change one of the independent clauses into a phrase or a dependent clause. All right, that concludes your lecture with a comma review at the beginning. All right, bye guys.